Hey guys, what's up? It's iFlynn here, and today I wanted to teach you guys how to survive for longer in the likes of a Kuva survival. Now the reason that I'm making this video is because the double resource weekend is literally on right now. Over the weekend there's going to be double resources, and if you guys don't know, if you jump into Kuva survival, you get yourself a resource booster that is going to stack on top of the double resource weekend, right? So you're going to get 4 times the resources. So 4 times the Kuva, which is going to allow you to reroll your sweet ribbons and, you know, get some maybe really cool things. So I wanted to make a video basically teaching you guys how to survive for a lot longer in Kuva survival, because the longer you stay, obviously the more that you get. Although you could maybe argue that doing the likes of a Kuva flood or a Kuva siphon might be a little bit more efficient, because it is balanced in the sense that you know, you can do either or, and you're more or less going to get the same amount of Kuva for the same amount of time. So it's really down to you. I recommend doing a mixture of both depending on your mood, because obviously spamming Kuva survival is going to be boring as hell. But if you are the type of person who wants to do an endurance run, I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about what you can do to survive for a lot longer. So yeah, I also recommend, before you like jump into any of the frame comps or anything like that, get yourself a Smita and get Tech Enhance on it, because if your Smita procs the resource buff, right? You know how she's awkwardly looking at me right now. If they proc the resource buff and you have Tech Enhance on, it's going to last for a lot longer, meaning you're going to get a lot more Kuva over a extended period of time because of that bonus resource buff coming from your kitty cat, right? So that's going to be awesome. So yeah, let's talk about the team comp and stuff like that. So first and foremost, in every single team comp that you're going to do for a endurance survival mission, you need a Necros, right? Now, I'm not on Necros right now, but whenever it comes to having a Necros, you want to be building around a Desecrate. Now, Desecrate is the ability which is going to essentially reroll the drop tables of dead enemies. Now, there's a lot of misconception around this ability, like maybe if you have a Nova or a Saren in your squad, the body kind of like melts away if they are affected by either Nova's M Prime or Saren's Spores, Miasma, whatever. And people think that Desecrate doesn't affect those abilities. Well, as far as I can tell, that's not true, because anytime we have a Necros in our squad and we're using those frames, Desecrate still works fine, because we get our extra small life support capsules, which is keeping us in the fight for longer. Because keep in mind, in Kuva survival, you're using the big life support capsules that get spawned in by the Lotus to siphon your Kuva, right? So you're putting your Kuva cell into the life support capsules, and then you're defending it until you get the Kuva from it, right? So to stay alive and stay in the survival, you got to get the smaller life support capsules from the enemies, and the best way to do that is to have a Necros to desecrate the bodies. Now, the 2 stats that you want to be focusing on whenever it comes to modding your Necros for Desecrate is your range and your efficiency, right? You don't need to bother with anything else. You don't need to worry about duration or whatever. Just throw on as much range as possible and as much efficiency as possible. If you want, you can build into Shield of Shadows. You can build into you know, a little bit of strength for Terrify if you're not running 4 times cruise projection. But 4 times cruise projection is highly recommended, especially if you're doing an endurance run, because stripping away enemy armor is extremely important, because enemy armor is going to scale endlessly, just like the enemy's level. And the more the enemy's armor scale up, the less damage you're going to be doing overall. So all 4 players in your team, doesn't matter what frames you're running, you should all be running cruise projection in your aura slots, so you don't really need to focus too much around building power strength for Terrify. But just focusing on Desecrate, having a lot of range, a lot of efficiency, so all the bodies are, you know, within range of your Necros affected by Desecrate, and you're using as little either health if you're using Despoil or energy as possible to desecrate those bodies. So Necros is a must-have. Do not replace him in any composition before going into a Kuva survival. Just make sure that one person is running this frame, and you should be good to go, right? Like I said, you can build in the Shield of Shadows as well. Personally, I don't build around that. I just like spamming Terrify and having Desecrate up, because enemies shouldn't really be shooting you in this run, because I am going to be talking about CC frames. So if we go ahead and we move on to our CC or defensive frame, right? Because I spoke about covering or defending the life support capsules while they're siphoning Kuva, right? So obviously we need a way to protect them from the bad guys. Now, there's a few options that people may consider. One of the more popular ones that I see in public lobbies is, of course, Limbo. Everybody hates Limbo players nowadays, and I hate Limbo for a reason that not everyone else hates him for. But players hate Limbo simply because, you know, it's difficult to kill enemies inside or outside the bubble, depending on where you're at, if Limbo is modding for max range or whatever. So players prefer it whenever the Limbo mods for negative range. But the thing is, it's a weird thing with Limbo where if your Limbo is running crucible projection and your 3 other teammates are running crucible projection, and let's say your Limbo is in the rift while enemies are spawning in, the enemies who are spawning in while your Limbo is in the rift are going to have armor because he's in like a different planes of existence, right? So he's not affecting those enemies with his aura because he's not in the same world as you, so to speak. So really weird, dumb interaction. And if that wasn't the case, I would be saying use Limbo in this run because it'll make it a hell of a lot easier. But that is the case, so I don't recommend using Limbo in this run. The next thing people may consider, well, all right, you can't use Limbo as your defensive frame, so use Frost, and that would be fine. But the thing is, because we're playing against the Grineer and just exclusively the Grineer, I would actually recommend playing a Radiating Disarm Loki because you're just be able to disarm every single enemy and they're gonna fight one another, right? So for your defensive frame, I recommend bringing Loki and just using this type of build right here. So you have as much range as possible, a decent amount of duration, as much efficiency as you want. You don't necessarily need to have efficiency because you're going to be using the likes of Zenark to get your energy back and whatnot, and potentially maybe a Trinity, because Trinity is definitely an option in this run as well, especially if you're going endurance, but you don't, again, necessarily need it because there is other ways to get your health and your energy back, but Trinity is just kind of there if you want then insane pool of energy, of course, so you don't have to worry about energy pads and whatnot. So Trinity is definitely an option in this team setup as well. But having Loki on here with as much range as possible, a decent amount of duration, and an okay amount of efficiency, as long as you can spam your Radiating Disarm or your Disarm, you should be a-okay. Just make sure you have as much range and you're able to affect enemies with a Radiating Disarm. Just spam this. Like, go to every single Kuva siphon thing that you can find and just spam this ability, right? That's all you have to do. There's nothing stopping you from just using this ability over and over and over again. Really one of the big downsides of the Grineer. There's no way for the Grineer to counter your Warframe abilities, so you can just spam this over and over and over again, and this is going to make any type of Grineer content extremely easy, right? So yeah, we have that. We've got our how to sustain our life support. We've got how to defend our Kuva siphons, right? Now, how do we kill the bad guys? Because as the enemy's level go up, then, you know, they're going to be a little bit harder to kill. So you want to be able to outscale or scale alongside the enemies in terms of damage and health, right? So the frames I would recommend for that is either a Saren, right? Because Saren's got some pretty nice scaling as well. So you got the scaling on Spores, and you've got the widespread viral procs on Miasma, which is just going to half like every single enemy that is affected, their health, and it's also going to deal damage over time. And I'll show you the build that I would recommend running on Saren right here. So this is 183% duration. It completely neglects efficiency because you got Zenark. We've got range on there to affect as many enemies as possible and have our spores scale as fast as possible. And we have a lot of power strength on there, so our damage ramps up as quickly as it can, right? So this is the build that I like to run on Saren, and she's the frame that I use the most in endurance runs in either defense or survival because just spawn kills, just murders. But the other frame that you can use, one of my personal favorites as well, Saren and Gara, are definitely my favorite frames. Just go ahead and throw in my better fashion frame here. But, you know, more or less the same thing. You can run this type of build right here, so you're neglecting the likes of like prime flow and whatnot for bonus duration, so you can keep your scaling and have it up for a lot longer. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about building around these things. What you want to make sure is that you have duration on there, so you don't have to keep your eye on your scaling damage too much, right? Because whenever your 2 goes down, then your scaling damage is basically done, right? Because the idea behind using Gara in this run is to hit your 4 right when your 2 is up, and that refreshes the duration, then jump outside of your 4 and hit your 1 to make a large nuke. And the more you keep on doing that while your 2 is up, the more the damage is going to scale up. So you can effectively like just one-shot everything endlessly going into this run as long as you keep on building up that stacking damage on Gara. So Gara, Saren, and to a degree, probably Equinox, but I would say that Gara and Saren are probably safer bets whenever it comes to scaling damage, whenever you're going into the likes of a survival or a defense. But the thing with playing Gara is you have to be active and jumping outside of your big glass shield, right? So if you're going to be playing Gara in this type of run, make sure that your Loki player is doing his job. If your Loki player is slacking a little bit, play Saren, because Saren's just a safer option, and the last thing you want to be doing is just dying over and over and over again, right? You don't want that to happen, because if you lose all your revives, well then you're going to miss out on all that sweet Kuva and just waste this double resource weekend, which is going to suck. Which brings us on to the last Warframe, which we can choose, and like I said, you could bring Trinity, or you could just bring pretty much any other frame, right? It's really down to you. I would recommend Trinity in any endurance run, simply because Trinity also has insane scaling damage on her energy vampire, right? So if we go ahead and we check out Trinity, it doesn't necessarily say it, but energy vampire scales in a way it's always going to take a percentage of the enemy's health, so it doesn't matter what level they are, it's always going to be dealing a massive amount of damage to the enemy, right? So it'll take about 2 casts of energy vampire on literally any enemy at any level to kill them. So that can come in handy whenever it comes to focusing down high priority targets. So let's say you go very, very deep into an endurance run in Kuva survival, and those pesky bombards are really doing your head in. Get your Trinity player to build around just energy vampire, right? So that is stacking as much power strength as possible with negative duration and as much range as possible. Efficiency doesn't really matter too much as long as you have enough to cast your energy vampire in the first place. And get your Trinity player to focus that bombard or whatever enemy you're having trouble killing with your second ability, and then they're going to die within 2 casts of it, and you're going to get that extra energy. And if you're using Vampire Leech, you're going to get that bonus shields, although if you're going very deep in the endgame, your Vampire Leech ability doesn't matter whatsoever, because shields just kind of are meh. But then again, you're going to have a Loki in your squad who's going to be disarming and whatnot, so you don't necessarily need that either. So yeah, I'd recommend going, if you're looking for a safe grip, Necros, Loki, Saren, and Trinity. If you want to be a little bit more on the edge, you could bring a Gara instead of the Saren, and the Gara will, out damage a lot quicker than Saren would, I think. You can also use Gara's Splinter Storm to, give 90% damage reduction to the life support capsules and all of your other teammates and whatnot, as long as they're staying near you and they are being affected by your 4, right? So that's pretty much that. It's extremely important to have cruise projection on, like I've already mentioned. All 4 players should have this aura mod on, because it's going to completely strip away the enemy armor, and it's going to make it so you can mod your weapons in a different way. Now, the loadout that I personally go into this with is a Dread, a Piranha Prime, and a Spin the Wind Zaw. Now, of course, there's a lot of different things that you could run. You could go with status chance and gas builds with being and whatnot, but I'm just going to explain the general consensus behind this build. So I've got my Split Chamber and my Serration on here for damage and multi-shot, Vital Sense and Point Strike for my critical chance and critical damage. There's a dog barking outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. 100 Munitions on here for slash procs whenever we crit, so they're going to proc very, very consistently. Prime Beam mods to double dip on our slash proc damage, which is just going to increase our overall DPS. I've made a video on Beam mods before, if you guys want to check that out. And then I have viral damage on here in the form of the dual stat elemental mods to consistently proc that viral proc, which is going to half the enemy's health. And because we have these viral procs which are eating away at the enemy's health, not viral procs, sorry, the slash procs, which are going to be eating away at the enemy's health, then they're going to die a lot faster. They're going to die in less shots, which is awesome. And you can make this build, you can replicate this build on pretty much any crit rifle in the game, right? You could also go with a Comb running mainly gas damage, gas and slash damage. If you have a Riven that has at least 120% status chance, multi-shot and fire rate are the other 2 stats that you want to be prioritizing on the Comb for optimal DPS. And then, more or less do the same thing for your secondaries, right? I'm running the viral damage on my Piranha here with Hornet Strike, Borrowed Fusion Lethal Torrent for my damage and multi-shot, plus fire rate on Lethal Torrent. Then I've got my primed Expel mod, the double dip on the slash procs, which, it's not super likely to happen because we don't have the likes of 100 Munitions on here, but because we have 45% status chance, the viral proc and the slash proc is going to kick in. Because the enemy doesn't have that much armor, then slash is just going to deal more overall damage, and you're just going to deal more overall damage, overall, because the enemy doesn't have the armor. It's not reducing your damage over a longer period of time, right? So primed primed pistol gambit, and primed target cracker for your critical damage and critical chance. So moving on to the melee, you can build crit condition overload hybrid, you can build condition overload, you can do spin the win. Spin the win, because these guys have absolutely no armor, you're just gonna die. The idea behind spin the win is just deal as much damage as you possibly can, get your hit damage numbers as high as possible, your crit chance, your crit damage as high as possible, all that jazz. Made a video on that yesterday, you can check that out. And yeah, crit condition overload is still definitely a viable option if you guys don't know how to build around that. I can show you an example on my dock room right here. So this is what it would kind of look like. You can throw on weapon wounds, you can throw on the dual stat elements and whatnot, but this is just personally what I like to run because it works for me, right? So yeah, that is pretty much it. Like I said, the only other avenue you could kind of explore is using a high status weapon with a expel mod or a beam mod using gas damage. And the reason that you would want to do that is because the gas damage over time is going to be triple dipped by the likes of your expel and your beam mods, right? So it's kind of the same as the slash double dipping mechanic, except it's just amplified 3 times rather than 2. So that can be very, very beneficial, implying you have weapons that have high enough status chance to consistently proc that gas damage over time. Because if you're going very, very deep, like you're going like, I want to say, let's say 3 hours or something, that's what you're going to want to run. And if you are going 3 hours or so, you're going to want to bring a Trinity as well. So that's just my kind of general overall advice. I'd also recommend, you know, stacking up on the likes of Spectres, right? Spectres can come in handy as well. If you bring a Octavia Spectre, your Octavia is going to buff up your and your team's damage because of the buffs on there. A Nidus Spectre, Oberon Spectre, Nidus is going to grip enemies up. Oberon Spectre is going to make you status immune, right? Even though the enemies should be disarmed, like what if you get slash procced out of nowhere or something like that? Things like that, dude. As for arcanes, I wouldn't recommend going into any defensive arcanes because, you know, you don't need them because the enemies should be completely disarmed all the time anyway. Instead, I would go for something which is going to increase your overall DPS. So velocity, acceleration, tempo, what did I say? Velocity, acceleration, tempo, strike. So strikes for your melee increases the attack speed. Tempos for your shotguns increases the fire rate. Accelerations for your rifles increases the fire rate. Velocities for your pistols increases the fire rate. And all that jazz. So yeah, I think that is pretty much all the advice that I can give you. I guess focus, run Xeneric. But then again, if you're running Trinity, don't necessarily need to run Xeneric. You could run Vazarin. You know, Vazarin's got the healing on there. You can make the Kuva siphons completely immune with this. You also have the instant revives and stuff like that. So yeah, I think honestly that is the most advice I can give you. Yeah, I think I'm done now. Cool, sweet. Build energy pads, build ammo pads. You're gonna need them. I hope this video helped you guys out. Have fun getting a shit ton of Kuva this weekend. I'm gonna be streaming it like from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock UK time on Twitch on Saturday, Sunday. Saturday maybe a little bit later because shopping in the morning time on Saturday. That's what me and my family do. But I'll be there and I'll be doing the runs and stuff like that. Thank you guys for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead, hit that like button below. And if you want to see more Warframe content from me, hit subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.